AI is such an important technology that every enterprise needs to have an implementation plan. The book, AI Value Creators, can be an important guide to help anyone make progress in the use of AIs in their enterprises. This video is a companion to the book and not a replacement for it. It is meant to be an introduction that will allow you to get more out of the material. Writing a book is hard. I know I've done it a few times myself. Having multiple authors can make it even more difficult, especially when much of the main concepts and ideas overlap many chapters. There is also the author's expertise that can be sometimes an issue where something obvious to them could deserve more emphasis. Here's what I want to do. I want to discuss the content in a different order from the book. For example, I prefer starting with Chapter 3 since I believe the reader is already convinced that AI is the future but may need help in making the case for upper management. I want to define some of the technical terms up front to make the book content clearer to the reader. I want to bring out key ideas, not just the ones that are well discussed, but also the ones that may appear less important or even trivial. Finally, I want to add my own content and commentaries to complement the book. Let me first start with the few things I didn't like about this book. The first one is the overuse of parenthetical. Some of the parentheticals should be part of the book, some others should simply not be there. For example, I don't need the 72-word parenthetical on page 16 that tells me the authors wanted to use a cricket example. I read slowly, my time is valuable. I bring this up because I feel that you have to read those parentheticals before figuring out if you can skip them. The second issue I have is that there are too many forward references telling me that I'll learn later about the term or concept I was just told about. In several cases, this can leave the reader at best uneasy about her comprehension and at worst confused. Finally, the third one is the use of unnecessary jargon. For example, the term inference is used 74 times throughout the book and is never defined. Even if the reader knows the general definition, it is not obvious in the context of generative AI. It would have been an easy fix to say it is the output of a generative AI model. Of course, it may have been too obvious to the authors to think of defining it since they live and breathe this technology. Let's now get to the good part, starting with Chapter 3, Equations for AI Persuasions. Chapter 3 presents 3 equations that in a way summarize the main points of the book. With this content, the reader will be better equipped to make the point for an enterprise strategy and provide a glimpse of how it should be approached. The first equation shows that the growth of the gross domestic product depends on the growth of the population, productivity, and debt. It makes the point that it is now difficult to increase the debt and that several countries already have a negative natural population growth. This leaves productivity, which is lackluster with an increase of 1.5% in the US, for example. This means that new approaches are needed to increase productivity, and AI is an attractive candidate. The second equation defines AI success. It basically explains that eventually AI will be the same for everyone, and the only way to get a competitive advantage is for an enterprise to use its proprietary data to improve the AI models that it uses in their specific business purposes. The business data has always been a business strategic advantage. Finally, the third equation shows the 3 main components that need to be balanced to achieve success in an AI strategy: proper leadership, skills for the entire enterprise, and being open or transparent with the technology used. There is a lot of excellent information in Chapter 3, and it will help the reader make the point for an AI strategy within his or her enterprise. It also provides a beginning of a roadmap on how to approach it. The book covers a lot of technology and technical terms that are sometimes left undefined, not clearly defined, or defined later. For example, the term neural network is used 18 times on 15 separate pages, but the authors assume that it is known to the reader. Other terms include weights or parameters, tokens, self-directed learning, transformers, and so on. Let's define these terms so we can get the most out of what the book offers. Let's start with the neural network, large language models, and generative AI. Artificial neural networks are modeled after human brain structure and functions. You can see here a simple representation of an artificial neural network, or neural network for short. The circles represent the neuron and the lines the connections between them. These connections are called synapses in neuroscience. Any input to a neural network is a number. In our case, imagine these numbers representing words coming into the neural network in the input layer, and the input layer is a sequence of words likely representing a sentence. Each input neuron is connected to each neuron from the first hidden layer. The first hidden layer feeds the next hidden layer and so on up to the output layer. Each neuron assigns a weight multiplier to each input. In our diagrams, we see 5 inputs for each neuron from the first hidden layer. A formula is applied to the input values as shown here. This is a useful representation to remember as you go through the book. The weights and the additional value represent the parameters of the neural network. In our example, we have 24 parameters. When we talk about a large language model, or LLM, you can imagine a similar neural network, simply much bigger. When you hear about billions of parameters, it is about the multiplier numbers we just talked about. Finally, a generative model, or Gen AI, is a type of LLM. Another thing you'll hear about is unsupervised learning or self-directed learning. The learning part is the adjustment of the parameters so they return the expected value. For a generative AI model, this means to predict the next word in a sequence. A sequence could be the content of a book. We know what the next word we want to predict is, so we can compare the predicted value to the actual value and then nudge the parameters to be closer to the actual answer. How the adjustments are done does not matter to understand Gen AI at this level. Since the actual next word is known, the process can be automated without human intervention. This is why it is called self-supervised or unsupervised. Let's talk about a few other terms. The first one is token. Just think of a token as a word. This is sufficient for your understanding at this level. You will also hear about transformers. This is a specialized structure within the Gen AI LLM. It is an amazing technology that provides additional context to better define the meaning of the word. Did you know that words like run has 645 different definitions? You can see here the top 8 words and their number of definitions. There are other terms used throughout the book, such as convolutional neural network, diffusion models, and RAG that you can just think of as technologies in the generative AI universe without having to dig further. There is one more thing I want to comment on. There are multiple statements in the book about LLMs being compressed representation of the internet. They can be found on page 35, 95, 221, 224, and 248. This is not an obvious conclusion. Gen AI LLMs are trained on the content of the internet. As mentioned earlier, the training involves predicting the next word in a sequence. An LLM adjusts its billions of parameters based on a sequence of words as it predicts the next one. The parameters can be considered the memory of an LLM that keeps an impression of the entire internet data that was used to train it. Because of this type of memory of the internet, we can see the parameters are a compressed representation of the entire internet. Now that we have a better understanding of what neural networks and LLMs are, we can return to the book, this time with Chapter 1, Plus AI to AI Plus, Generative AI and the Netscape Moment. This chapter sets the roadmap for an enterprise AI strategy. Now that we have an idea of what Gen AI is, it is easier to understand some of the key statements made in Chapter 1. Let's start with a few statements I found impactful. The first one is language can be anything. There are specific languages for pharmaceutical or chemical companies that can take advantage of Gen AI, so always try to identify any unconscious limitations you may be operating on. If you have a specialized way to express your business, it could be part of the training of an LLM. Your business needs to know exactly what its priorities are. Focus on the business priorities, not on the technical requirements. This way, you will know where to put your efforts to achieve your AI goals. Moving on, I find figure 1.3 to be the most important figure in the chapter. It shows the route from plus AI to AI plus. The first rung of the ladder is about an information architecture where you collect, organize, and protect your data. This requires more context now, even if the context is provided in later chapters when the subject is covered in more details. There is a quick way to look at it. If everybody uses Gen AI, what is your business advantage? It is, just like before, your business data. You need to integrate your business data into your AI strategy. Having an information architecture is not new. Many companies have been working on theirs for years and are ready to take advantage of it in the age of AI. An information architecture data fabric provides efficient and secure access to your data wherever it lives. This is the key to unlock the values of your data for your AI projects. There is a lot of good information in Chapter 1. This will give you a good foundation on what you need to do. I want to point out two more things. The authors suggest to first focus on categories of projects related to automation, optimization, and prediction. Finally, I want to leave the chapter with its first tip on page 24. Act with urgency. The best time to start working on your AI strategy is now, otherwise you may be left behind. At this point, we cover some key content of Chapter 1 and Chapter 3. To complete the companion guide, I want to discuss three main topics: model selection, model use, and employee upskilling. One key point made by the authors is that not one model will be the answer to all problems. It is easy to grasp when you try to answer two questions. What is the model for? Where will it run? Do you expect a model to be best at customer service while also be best for self-driving cars, detecting cancer, provide legal advices, or workload automation? That is not possible. Even if it were, the model would likely be multiple orders of magnitude larger than a more specialized one. This leads us to the second question. Where do you want to run the model? Remember that when we are talking about the number of parameters in a model, we're talking about numbers that multiply input values. So if you have a model with, let's say, 1 billion parameters, you potentially have in the order of 2 billion operations executed when considering the multiplied values are then added together. Do you want this model available on a laptop or on an edge device? Even if everything using this model connects back to a centralized data center, how big would the data center be? How much could it scale? How much would you need to spend in energy consumption? As the authors mention on page 117, the world is writing energy checks it can't cash. The inevitable conclusion is that you need to spend time to find the right model for each of your business problems, as the authors articulate in Chapter 7. Very few companies, if any, will start from scratch to create models. Just imagine the number of terabytes required for the unsupervised training. Picking a foundation model is not a trivial task. For example, Hugging Face, the AI community site, lists over 1.7 billion models. Talk about the tyranny of choice. The problem does not end there. What do you know about the data used to train the model? Is it safe to use it, or does it contain copyrighted material that could come back to haunt you? What about misinformation or hallucinations that could make you lose credibility? As the authors state on page 27, you lose trust in buckets and gain it in droplets. Foundation model selection and more is where Chapter 5 comes in handy. It talks about fairness, robustness, explainability, and data lineage. It covers aspects of prompt injection attacks, data privacy, and more. All these things are essential in AI projects. Of course, since your business advantage resides in your data, the implementation of a proper information architecture will be required to fully take advantage of your data resources. One last point about using models. The authors mention AI agents and agentic AI throughout the book. This is yet another use of generative AI models that will most likely be present in many of your projects. Think of an agent as being a system that can act independently to achieve specific business objectives. They will likely interact with other systems such as databases, payment systems, and emails. Since business tasks usually involve complex interactions from multiple systems, they will also interact with other agents as part of a workflow. Agents could even be set up to learn as time goes by. See what the authors say about this in Chapter 7, starting on page 206. The last subjects I want to comment on is employee upskilling that is discussed in Chapter 6. There is a statement made in Chapter 1, the prompt has literally given non-techies superpower. The statement seems paradoxical for the authors to allocate 32 pages on the subject of skills, but it is not, as we'll see shortly. The authors take the position that the enterprise needs a massive upskilling around Gen AI, LLMs, and agents. On page 150, it goes as far as saying, organizations, stop seeing upskilling as a cost center. It's the ultimate value creator. Chapter 6 covers all aspects of establishing a successful organization for massive upskilling, talking amongst other things about skill inventory, action plans, learning curves, cultural changes, and more. Why the seemingly contradictory statements? This is because upskilling is more than using a set of tools. It is mainly about problem solving, understanding how to use the technology, and understanding how far you can go with it. It is too easy to apply unconscious limitation and not exploit the full potential of AI. Then there is the use of natural language interfaces with the AI tools. To a smaller extent, we have seen the hopes of opening the doors to non-technical people before. When the relational database language SQL came out, the hope was that people could easily interrogate database systems to get the data they wanted. The reality was that it did open the door for some people, but the door stayed closed for a large number of people. Even some technical people are unable to write proper SQL. All this to say that a natural language prompt does not guarantee success in solving business problems. You cannot simply ask for a solution. You need to clearly express what the problem is, and you also likely have to sketch out what the solution can be and see what AI gives you in return. You need experience, expertise, and creativity. You need critical thinking skills so you can evaluate what you get in return and make appropriate changes to the prompt to get a solution that fits your needs. The prompt is not a magic tool that gives the user superpowers. It is a tool that can amplify the skills of the user. That gives a glimpse of the real issue. No matter how easy a technology is, problem-solving skills are required. Just like any skills, those skills need to be developed. Also, no significant business problem can be solved in one quick step. It needs the involvement of a set of multiple systems that interact with each other. The more systems involved, the higher the complexity. You then need to worry about a brand new set of tangential concerns. As the authors say on page 120, the more you put AI to work in your business, the more you expand the surface area of attack on your business. So you need to make sure the employees are well trained in the use of the technology and the needed security around it. One more thing about skills. If you are not in a position to implement an upskilling infrastructure, you are the target of it. Do not be a passive target. Do not wait for your enterprise to train you. Be curious. There's a lot of information out there that can help, and also many free tools that can help you to understand what this technology can do. Just make sure you don't use any of your enterprise confidential information for those tools. For example, you can take a PDF copy of this AI Value Creator book into something like Google Notebook LM and start interacting with it. Try a statement like, what's the most important thing to do in learning about Gen AI? And see what comes back and how useful the answer is. Generate and look at the study guide and the briefing doc. At any opportunity, try to complement your effort with Gen AI. Even if you don't use anything generated through Gen AI, the extra time is well spent as personal training and technology understanding. You are in charge of your own upskilling, like the authors say on page 152. AI won't replace you, but people using AI will. This video should give you the background to get the most out of the AI Value Creator book. The few things I want you to remember from this video are, you ultimately won't compete against AI, but you will be competing against other companies using AI. If you are using the same AI models and services as everybody else, you are just evening out the odds against your competitors. To differentiate yourself, you need to customize and tailor models using your proprietary data, and for that, you need an information architecture. Finally, have a sense of urgency. Start now. You can find links to the reference material used in this video in the description. Let me know what you think about this video and its subject. I'll see you next time on Bite Size Data Science.